What happens when you become so good at surviving alone that you forget how to let someone love you? My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I learned independence before I learned love. At 15, I became the parent my mother couldn't be. At 18, I was paying bills while my classmates worried about prom. At 25, I had built a life so self-sufficient that when love finally found me, I didn't know how to accept it. This is the story of how I punished everyone who tried to get close, not because I was cruel, but because I'd learned that needing someone was the most dangerous thing you could do. This is my revenge against vulnerability, and how it almost cost me everything worth having. The fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room hummed like trapped insects, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made everyone look half dead already. I sat with perfect posture, hands folded in my lap, face composed into the mask of calm competence I'd perfected over 10 years of crisis management. My phone buzzed for the 14th time. Another text from Marcus. Elena, please tell me where you are. I'm worried. I turned the phone face down without responding. The automatic doors whooshed open, admitting a gust of autumn air that smelled like rain and car exhaust. Dr. Patel emerged from the restricted area, her expression carefully neutral, the face doctors wore when delivering news that would change your life in small, irreversible ways. Miss Rodriguez? She approached with the measured steps of someone bearing weight. Your mother is stable. The pneumonia is responding to antibiotics, but her liver function is declining. We need to discuss long-term care options. I nodded, already mentally reorganizing my budget to accommodate whatever came next. This was what I did. I handled things. I solved problems. I stood alone against the chaos and kept everything from falling apart through sheer force of will. I understand, I said, my voice steady. What are her care needs? As Dr. Patel outlined treatment plans and facility options, I took notes with the same efficient precision I brought to everything. Behind us, a family clustered together, father, mother, adult children all leaning on each other, sharing the burden of their crisis. I sat alone, because that's how I'd learned to face everything. My phone buzzed again. Marcus, always Marcus. Trying to break through walls I'd spent a decade building, but to understand why I couldn't answer those texts. Why? The thought of accepting help made my chest tight with something like panic. You have to go back. Back to the girl I was before I learned that independence wasn't just a virtue, it was armor. I was 15 when I found my mother passed out on the bathroom floor. An empty bottle of pills scattered around her like broken promises. It wasn't the first time, but it was the time that taught me a lesson I'd carry like a scar. The only person you can truly rely on is yourself. The ambulance came. The social workers followed. They talked about intervention and treatment and family support systems, using words that sounded like help but felt like judgment. My mother cried and promised to do better, the same promise she'd made a dozen times before. Do you have family who can stay with you? The social worker asked, her eyes kind but tired, like she'd seen this story too many times to believe in happy endings. I'll be fine, I said, already calculating how many days until mom's next paycheck, whether we could stretch the groceries, which bills could be delayed without consequences. You're only 15, I'll be fine, I repeated, harder this time. I always am, and I was. I became fine through sheer determination. I forged mom's signature on permission slips and cooked meals from whatever ingredients I could find. I did homework in hospital waiting rooms and learned to speak to landlords with confidence. I didn't feel. I became an adult at an age when other kids were still learning to be children. The independence I developed wasn't liberating, it was suffocating. But it kept us afloat when everything else was sinking. By 18, I was working 2 jobs while finishing high school. With a 4.0 GPA, I'd learned to anticipate every crisis, to have contingency plans for my contingency plans, to never show weakness, because weakness invited disaster. I also learned that needing people was dangerous. Every time I'd reached out for help, it came with conditions. Teachers who offered support but reported us to authorities. Family friends who promised assistance but wanted to feel like saviors to our tragedy. Even my father, who'd left when I was 12, occasionally called with empty offers of help that evaporated the moment actual effort was required. So I stopped reaching out. I stopped needing. I built a fortress of self-sufficiency and told myself it was strength. Marcus Jennings walked into my life like sunrise after a long night, gradual, inevitable, and impossible to ignore. We met at a professional development conference where I was speaking about crisis management in nonprofit organizations. Ironic, really, given that my expertise came from managing my own endless personal crisis. He approached after my presentation, tall and disarmingly genuine, with eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "That was incredible," he said. "The way you broke down emergency response protocols. You've clearly lived this. Not just studied it. Experience is the best teacher," I replied, keeping my professional mask firmly in place. "I'm Marcus. I run a community outreach program for at-risk youth. We could really use someone with your skill set for a consulting project." We exchanged business cards. Professional, appropriate, safe. Except Marcus didn't stay safely in the professional category. He called the next day to discuss the consulting work, and somehow the conversation drifted from budgets and program design to favorite books and childhood dreams. He was easy to talk to, in a way that felt dangerous. "You should be careful," I told him, half joking. "I'm very good at keeping people at arm's length. Lucky for you." "I have long arms," he replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Over the following weeks, professional meetings became coffee dates, became long conversations that stretched into evening. Marcus had a way of looking at me that made me feel seen, not just the competent professional facade, but something deeper I usually kept hidden. "Tell me about your family," he said, one evening over dinner, at a small Italian restaurant that smelled like garlic and memories of places I'd never been. The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of discomfort through my carefully maintained composure. "Not much to tell," I said lightly. "My mother and I are close in our own way. My father's out of the picture." "That must have been hard." "It was a long time ago." Marcus reached across the table, his hand covering mine with gentle pressure. "Elena, you know you don't have to be invincible all the time, right? It's okay to have struggled. It's okay to still struggle." I pulled my hand back as if his touch burned. "I'm fine. I don't struggle. I handle things." Something flickered in his eyes, not hurt exactly, but a kind of sad recognition. "Everyone needs help sometimes." "Not everyone," I countered, signaling for the check. "Some of us learn to save ourselves." The evening ended awkwardly, with Marcus looking like he wanted to say more, and me wanting to run. I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight, angry at him for pushing, angry at myself for feeling defensive, angry at the whole situation for making me feel things I'd spent years learning not to feel. But he didn't give up. Marcus called the next day, acting as if nothing had happened, inviting me to visit the youth center where he worked. "No pressure," he said. "Just thought you might like to see what we're doing." I went, telling myself it was professional curiosity. The center was housed in a renovated warehouse, filled with the organized chaos of teenagers finding themselves. Art covered the walls, vibrant, angry, hopeful expressions of lives in progress. Music thumped from a recording studio in the back. In the main room, kids clustered around tables working on homework, art projects, and what looked like a community garden design. "This is amazing," I said, meaning it. "You built this?" "We built this," Marcus corrected. "It takes a community. Nobody does anything meaningful alone." The words felt like an accusation, though his tone was gentle. I watched him interact with the kids' easy affection, genuine interest, boundaries that felt like safety nets rather than walls. A girl of about 16 approached him with a permission slip, nervous energy radiating from her like heat. "Mr. J, my mom can't come to the college fair because she works late. And they said, we need a parent or guardian, but I really want to go. And I don't know what to do." "Breathe, Jasmine," Marcus said calmly. "We'll figure it out. Can your mom sign the form? I can be there as your program supervisor." Really? Relief transformed her face. Really? You're not in this alone. I watched this exchange with a strange tightness in my chest. At 15, I'd forged signatures because asking for help felt like admitting defeat. This girl had someone who told her she didn't have to do everything alone. You're good with them, I said after Jasmine left, beaming. They remind me that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's just being human. Marcus looked at me directly, that penetrating gaze that seemed to see through all my carefully constructed defenses. Something I think you might have forgotten. I haven't forgotten anything, I said, more sharply than intended. I just learned different lessons. Like what? Like people will let you down. Like needing someone gives them power to hurt you. Like the only person you can truly count on is yourself. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was soft. Who hurt you so badly that you decided loving people was more dangerous than being alone? The question hit like a physical blow. I felt tears threatening actual tears, which I hadn't allowed myself in years. I need to go, I said, already moving toward the exit. Elena, wait, but I was already gone, practically running to my car, desperate to get away from the feelings he'd stirred up, from the possibility he represented, from the terrifying thought that maybe, just maybe, I'd been wrong about needing to do everything alone. That night, I sat in my apartment, a perfectly organized, carefully maintained space that looked like a magazine spread and felt like a museum, and forced myself to confront the truth. I was in love with Marcus, had been for weeks, maybe from the first conversation, and I was absolutely terrified because loving someone meant needing them, and needing them meant giving them power to hurt you, to disappoint you, to leave you dealing with the wreckage of your own hope. My phone rang. Marcus, of course. I let it go to voicemail. His message was simple. I'm sorry if I pushed too hard today. I just care about you, Elena. And I think you might care about me too, even though that scares you. Call me when you're ready to talk. I'll wait. I listened to the message 3 times, then deleted it. Then recovered it from deleted messages and listened again. Then finally, at midnight, I did something I almost never did. I called someone for help. Hello? My best friend Sarah's voice was groggy with sleep. Did I wake you? Elena, what's wrong? Are you okay? Is it your mom? The immediate jump to crisis mode reminded me how rarely I reached out for anything other than emergencies. No, nothing like that. I need advice. About a guy. Silence. Then, I'm sorry. Did you just say you need advice about a guy? Elena Rodriguez, queen of emotional unavailability, is calling me about a man? If you're going to mock me, no, I'm just shocked. In a good way. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her about Marcus, about his patience and kindness, about how he made me feel seen and terrified in equal measure, about how every instinct I'd developed screamed at me to run before I got hurt. Elena, Sarah said when I finally finished, do you hear yourself? You're literally describing a healthy relationship and treating it like a threat, because it is. Needing people is dangerous, no honey. Being 15 and alone was dangerous. Being in your 20s and choosing isolation because you're scared is just sad. Her voice softened. You've been carrying everything alone for so long that you've forgotten that sharing the weight makes it lighter, not heavier. What if he leaves? What if he doesn't? What if this is the person who stays? But you'll never know unless you let him in. We talked until almost a.m., Sarah gently dismantling arguments I'd spent a decade constructing. When I finally hung up, I felt raw and exposed, like I'd shed a layer of protective armor, and couldn't quite figure out how to move without it. But I also felt something else. Something that might have been hope. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls. Not from Marcus, from my mother's care facility. The fortress of independence I'd built came crashing down in the space of a phone call. Mom had collapsed. Emergency room. Complications from her chronic health issues that we'd both been pretending were manageable. I went into crisis mode, automatically calling doctors, arranging leave from work, managing insurance paperwork from a hospital corridor that smelled like disinfectant and despair. This was familiar territory. This was what I knew how to do. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Haven't heard from you. Everything okay? I stared at the message for a long time, Sarah's words echoing in my head. What if this is the person who stays? But old habits died hard. I typed, everything's fine, just busy, then deleted it. Typed, my mom's in the hospital. I'm scared. Deleted that too. Finally settled on, can't talk right now. I'll call you later. It was a lie. I had no intention of calling him later, because accepting his support would mean admitting I couldn't handle this alone. It would mean showing him the messy, complicated reality of my life instead of the polished professional version he'd fallen for. It would mean being vulnerable, and vulnerability was the one thing I'd sworn never to risk. Again, 3 days in the hospital waiting room taught me that independence had its limits. I managed mom's care with the same efficiency I brought to everything, but exhaustion crept in around the edges of bone-deep weariness that no amount of coffee could fix. Dr. Patel's diagnosis was clear. Mom needed long-term residential care. Her liver was failing, her immune system compromised. She couldn't live alone anymore. I'll take care of it, I told the doctor, already mentally rearranging my life to accommodate this new reality. Maybe I could work from home more. Maybe I could hire a part-time nurse. Maybe Miss Rodriguez, Dr. Patel interrupted gently, taking care of your mother full-time isn't feasible. You have your own life, your own career. There are excellent facilities. I don't put family in facilities, I said, the words sharp with old wounds. I take care of my own, because that's what I did. I took care of things, alone. My phone had 43 unread messages. Most were from Marcus, progressing from concern to worried to something that looked like hurt wrapped in understanding. Elena, please just tell me you're okay. I'm here if you need anything. Even if that's just someone to sit with you in silence. I'm not going anywhere. But I need to know you're alive and safe. Finally, I care about you. I know you're used to handling everything alone, but you don't have to. Please let me help. I sat in the hospital parking lot at PM, staring at those messages with tears I wouldn't let fall. Part of me wanted to call him desperately. The other part, the part that had kept me safe for 10 years, whispered that needing him was weakness, that letting him see this mess would drive him away. My finger hovered over his contact for 5 full minutes before I finally, terrifyingly pressed call. He answered on the first ring. Elena, just my name, but the relief in his voice nearly broke me. I'm at County General, I said, my voice smaller than I'd intended. My mom, she's sick. She needs long-term care, and I don't know how to. I can't. The words caught in my throat, years of held-back emotion threatening to spill over. I'm coming, Marcus said immediately. Stay where you are. 20 minutes. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. That's what people do when they care about each other. Elena, they show up. He hung up before I could argue, and I sat in my car, shaking with something between panic and relief. Marcus arrived exactly 20 minutes later, materializing in the parking lot like he'd been summoned by my need. He didn't ask questions or demand explanations. He just pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home after years of wandering. I've got you, he murmured against my hair. You don't have to do this alone. And for the first time in a decade, I let myself lean on someone else's strength. We sat in his car. Mine was littered with coffee cups and medical forms, and I told him everything. About mom's addiction and health problems. About being 15 and learning to forge signatures. About building a life so independent that I'd forgotten how to accept help. About how terrified I was of needing him because everyone I'd ever needed had eventually let me down. Marcus listened without interrupting, his hand steady on mine, his presence an anchor in the chaos. I'm not going anywhere, he said, when I finally finished. I know you don't believe that yet. You've been trained by experience to expect people to leave. But I'm not everyone else, Elena. And loving you doesn't scare me. Your determination to push me away does. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. How to need someone. How to let someone see me when I'm not strong and capable and handling everything perfectly. You start by believing that I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be honest. To let me in. To trust that I can handle your reality, even the messy parts. Over the next week, Marcus became my partner in crisis management. He didn't take over, he understood my need for control too well for that, but he stood beside me. He brought food when I forgot to eat. He made phone calls to insurance companies when I was too exhausted to navigate the bureaucratic maze. He sat with Mom while I went home to shower and sleep in my own bed for the first time in days, and slowly, terrifyingly, I started to trust that he might actually stay. We found a care facility that felt more like a home than an institution, small, well-staffed, with gardens and art therapy and staff who treated residents like people instead of patients. It cost more than I could afford, and I was preparing to take out loans when Marcus suggested something that made my independence alarm bells ring. Let me help with the costs, he said over dinner in my apartment the first time he'd been there, witnessing my perfectly controlled living space. Not all of it, but enough to ease the burden. Think of it as an investment in your well-being. I can't accept your money, I said automatically, decades of self-sufficiency making the idea feel like charity. Why not? Because that's not how I do things. I take care of myself. Elena, look around your apartment. You have nothing personal anywhere. No photos, no mementos, nothing that says someone actually lives here. It's like you're afraid to put down roots, to admit you might need anything or anyone. Even furniture. He gestured to my minimalist space. This isn't independence. It's isolation. The words struck like a physical blow because they were true. I'd created a life where I needed nothing and no one. Where I could pack up and leave at a moment's notice. Where letting go of anything or anyone wouldn't hurt because I'd never allowed attachment in the first place. I don't know how to be any different, I whispered. Marcus moved closer, taking my hands in his. Then let me teach you. Let me show you that needing people doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. That accepting help isn't failure, it's wisdom. That love isn't about losing independence, it's about choosing to share your life with someone who makes it better. What if you leave? What if I stay? What if we build something together that's stronger than what either of us could create alone? I looked into his eyes and saw something I'd never fully trusted before. Genuine commitment. Not the conditional support that evaporated when things got hard, but real partnership. Okay, I said, the word barely audible. Okay. Accepting Marcus's help was like learning to walk on a healing broken bone, painful, uncertain, but necessary for recovery. He contributed to Mom's care costs, and instead of feeling like charity, it felt like partnership. Like we were solving a problem together, instead of me carrying everything alone. But old patterns die hard. 2 weeks later, my car broke down on the way to visit Mom. A minor issue, alternator failure, but it meant I'd miss visiting hours and disappoint her. My first instinct was to solve it myself. Call a tow truck, arrange for repairs, take ride shares until my car was fixed. Independent, capable, alone. Then I thought about Marcus's words about choosing to share my life with someone. I called him. Hey, everything okay? He answered immediately, and I realized he always did, always answered, always responded, always showed up. My car broke down. I was wondering if, could you possibly, would you mind giving me a ride to the care facility? Silence. Then, Elena Rodriguez, did you just ask me for help voluntarily? I could hear the smile in his voice, the gentle teasing that made vulnerability feel less terrifying. Don't make a big thing out of it. Oh, I'm making a huge thing out of it. This is a milestone. I'm documenting this moment. Where are you? He arrived 30 minutes later, and we drove to visit Mom together. She'd been having a good day, lucid, present, more like the mother I remembered from before addiction and illness had stolen so much of her. Who's this handsome man? She asked when we entered her room. This is Marcus, Mom. My boyfriend. The word felt strange and wonderful in my mouth, like speaking a foreign language I was just learning. Boyfriend? Mom's eyes lit up with genuine joy. Elena has a boyfriend. Sweetheart, I was beginning to think you'd decided to be alone forever. So was I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. But Marcus is persistent. I prefer dedicated, Marcus said. Charming mom within minutes with his easy conversation and genuine interest in her stories. Watching them interact, I felt something shift inside me. This was what family could look like, not just obligation and crisis management, but connection and support. Not independence or dependence, but interdependence. After our visit, as we drove back through the city, Marcus asked, "Why did you really think you had to be alone, Elena? What happened that made you decide needing people was too dangerous?" I was quiet for a long time, watching streetlights blur past the window. I don't think it was one thing. It was accumulation. My dad leaving and acting like we were fine without him. Mom needing me, but never being able to be there for me in return. Teachers and social workers offering help, but really offering judgment. Every person I trusted letting me down in small ways until I just decided it was safer to trust no one. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly. "I'm sorry that life taught you that lesson. But Elena, those people, they weren't ready to show up for you the way you needed. That doesn't mean no one ever will. How do you know you will? How do you know you won't get tired of my walls and my issues and my inability to accept love without panicking?" He pulled into my apartment complex parking lot but didn't turn off the car. Instead, he turned to face me fully, his expression serious. "I don't know for certain. None of us can guarantee the future. But I can promise you that I'm choosing us every single day. And I'm asking you to choose it too. Not perfectly, not without fear, but intentionally. What if I don't know how? Then we learn together. Elena, love isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to figure it out as you go, with someone who thinks you're worth the effort." I kissed him then, in the parking lot of my apartment complex, pouring 10 years of loneliness and fear and desperate hope into that connection. When we finally pulled apart, I was crying, actually crying, something I'd trained myself not to do in front of anyone. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "Me too," he said. Loving someone is always terrifying, but it's also the best thing we get to do as humans. Over the following months, I slowly dismantled the fortress of independence I'd spent a decade building. It wasn't easy. My instincts still screamed at me to handle everything alone, to push Marcus away when things got difficult, to retreat into self-sufficiency at the first sign of vulnerability. But I fought those instincts when work overwhelmed me. I asked Marcus to help me think through problems instead of drowning in them alone. When I felt scared about Mom's declining health, I called him instead of pretending I was fine. When he went through his own crisis at the youth center funding cuts that threatened programs he'd built from nothing, I showed up for him the way he'd shown up for me. I learned that interdependence wasn't weakness. It was choosing to share both burdens and joys, to be someone's support while accepting theirs in return. I also started therapy, something I'd always dismissed as unnecessary because I was fine with professional help. I began unpacking the beliefs I'd internalized, that needing people was dangerous, that showing vulnerability invited hurt, that love was something that would inevitably be taken away. "You learned independence as survival," my therapist explained. "But now you're safe enough to learn that connection is also survival, just a different kind." Humans aren't meant to be completely self-sufficient. We're wired for community, for partnership, for love. But what if he leaves? I asked for the 100th time, the fear still lurking beneath my growing trust. "Then you'll survive that too. But you'll survive it, having known love, having experienced partnership, having learned that you're capable of both independence and connection. The question isn't whether you'll survive, you've already proven you're a survivor. The question is whether you're willing to live, really live, not just survive." Those words stayed with me, reshaping how I thought about my life. I'd spent so long focused on survival that I'd forgotten to actually live. So I started living. I let Marcus help me redecorate my apartment, adding personal touches that made it feel like a home instead of a hotel. I put up photos of Mom from before she got sick, of Sarah and me from college, of Marcus and me at the youth center. I bought plants and art and a ridiculous throw blanket that served no functional purpose but made me happy. I introduced Marcus to my extended world, Sarah, who approved enthusiastically. My boss, who noticed I seemed lighter somehow. Even the nurses at Mom's facility, who commented that I smiled more, and I let myself be vulnerable with him in ways that terrified and liberated me in equal measure. The turning point came 8 months after we met. During a particularly difficult week, Mom had taken a turn for the worse, requiring hospitalization again. Work had exploded with a crisis that demanded my immediate attention. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and every old instinct screamed at me to handle it alone, to prove I didn't need anyone. Instead, I called Marcus. "I can't do this," I said, when he answered, my voice breaking. "I can't be at the hospital and manage this work crisis and keep it together, and I can't." "Okay," he said calmly. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to the hospital to sit with your mom so you don't have to worry about her being alone. You're going to handle your work crisis because you're brilliant at your job. Then tonight, we're going to order terrible takeout and watch mindless TV. And you're going to let yourself fall apart if you need to. And tomorrow, we'll figure out next steps together." "That's your solution? You'll just go sit with my mom, a woman you've met 3 times? Elena, she's important to you. That makes her important to me. This is what partnership looks like." I cried at my desk, actually cried in my office, something the independent, controlled version of me would never have allowed. Then I dried my tears, handled my work crisis with the confidence I'd spent years developing, and came home to find Marcus waiting with Chinese food and concern. "How's Mom?" I asked immediately. "Resting comfortably. The nurses said the antibiotics are helping. She asked about you. I told her you were managing a work emergency. She seemed proud." "Thank you," I said, and the words carried 10 years of unsaid gratitude. "Thank you for showing up, for staying, for making me believe that needing someone doesn't have to be dangerous." Marcus set down the takeout containers and pulled me close. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for being brave enough to let me love you." "I'm still learning," I admitted. "Some days I still want to push you away. I know. But you don't. That's what matters." We ate terrible Chinese food and watched a ridiculous action movie, and it was perfect. Not because everything was fine. Mom was still sick. Work was still stressful. Life was still complicated, but because I wasn't facing it alone anymore. A year after we met, Marcus proposed in the least dramatic way possible. We were at the youth center, painting a mural with kids from the program. I had paint in my hair and on my clothes, and I'd never felt more myself. "Hey Elena," Marcus said casually, "want to get married?" I froze, paintbrush hovering in midair. "Excuse me? Married? You know, that thing where 2 people who love each other decide to build a life together officially. Want to do that?" Around us, teenagers erupted into excited chaos. "Did Mr. J just propose? Oh, my God, this is so romantic. Miss Elena, you have to say yes." "That was possibly the worst proposal in history," I said, but I was smiling so wide my face hurt. "I know. But I also know you'd hate some big public gesture with pressure and expectations. I wanted to ask you here, with these kids who've watched us both learn to be vulnerable, in a place that represents community and connection, everything you're learning to embrace." "You're right," I admitted. "I would have hated a fancy proposal. This is perfect. You're perfect. So is that a yes?" I kissed him, in front of a dozen cheering teenagers, with paint-covered hands and no doubts. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." 6 months later, the wedding got married at the youth center, surrounded by chosen family and the kids who'd become part of our lives. Mom was there in a wheelchair, clear-eyed and present, looking more like herself than she had in years. Sarah stood as my maid of honor, teary-eyed as she watched me commit to the one thing I'd sworn I'd never do: need someone completely. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, as we waited. For my cue to walk down the aisle, Marcus and the kids had decorated with wildflowers and string lights. I'm terrified, I admitted. Good, that means it matters. I walked down that makeshift aisle toward Marcus, who looked at me like I was every answer he'd been searching for. We'd written our own vows, and when it was my turn, I spoke from the heart, instead of from the protected place I'd lived in for so long. Marcus, I began, my voice stronger than I felt. I learned independence before I learned love. I learned to survive alone before I learned it was okay to need someone. You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's courage. That asking for help isn't failure, it's wisdom. That building a life with someone doesn't mean losing yourself, it means becoming more fully yourself because you're safe enough to show all the parts you've been hiding. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't hide them. I don't promise to be perfect, because I learned a long time ago that perfection is just armor. But I promise to choose us every day, to be vulnerable, even when it terrifies me, to ask for help when I need it, to let you love me, really love me, messy parts and all. I learned independence before love, but with you, I'm learning that the bravest thing I can do is choose both. Marcus's vows were equally tearful, equally honest, and when we kissed as husband and wife, the youth center erupted in cheers. I'm 30 years old now, sitting in the office of the nonprofit Marcus and I started together an organization that provides support services for teens dealing with family crisis. We help them navigate the chaos while also teaching them that asking for help is strength, not weakness. Mom lives in a beautiful assisted living facility nearby, her health stabilized, her spirits good. She meets us for brunch every Sunday, delighting in her grandchildren, yes, children. Because I've learned that love multiplies when you share it. Our daughter Elena, named after me, is 3 and fearless. Our son Sam is 18 months and determined to keep up with his sister. They're learning early what took me decades to understand. Independence is important, but so is connection. Mama, why are you crying? Elena asks, tugging on my sleeve as I sort through old photos for a presentation I'm giving on childhood resilience. I'm not sad crying, baby. I'm happy crying. There's a difference. What are you happy about? I'm happy that I learned something very important. Being strong doesn't mean doing everything alone. It means being brave enough to let people love you. Elena considers this with the seriousness of a 3-year-old philosopher. I love you, Mama. I love you too, sweet girl. Marcus appears in the doorway, Sam on his hip, looking tired and happy and exactly like home. Ready for the board meeting? Almost, I say, closing my laptop and standing. Thank you for watching the kids. It's called parenting, not babysitting, he reminds me, with a gentle smile. We're in this together. Right, together. The word still fills me with wonder sometimes that I found someone who made together feel safe instead of suffocating. T the board meeting. I present our 5-year impact report. Hundreds of teens helped. Dozens of families connected to resources. Countless young people learning that survival isn't the same as living. As I speak, I think about the 15-year-old version of myself who believed she had to do everything alone. I wish I could tell her what I know now. That independence is beautiful, but it's not meant to be solitary. That the bravest thing you can do isn't build walls to keep hurt out, it's leave the gates open for love to find its way in. After the meeting, I drive to Mom's facility. She's in the garden, reading, looking peaceful in the late afternoon sun. Hi, Mama, I say, kissing her cheek. Elena, sweetheart, how was your day? Busy, good, full. I sit beside her, taking her hand. I wanted to thank you. For what? For teaching me resilience, even if you taught it in painful ways. For surviving your own demons long enough to be here now, to know your grandchildren, to see me build the life I have. Mom's eyes fill with tears. I'm sorry I wasn't the mother you needed when you were young, I know. But you're the grandmother my children need now. And that's enough. It's more than enough. We sit in comfortable silence. 2 women who learned independence the hard way, who survived chaos through sheer determination, who are finally learning together that survival is just the beginning. That night, I lie in bed next to Marcus, listening to the baby monitor transmit the gentle sounds of our children sleeping. His arm is around me, solid and warm, and I don't feel trapped by the contact. I feel anchored. What are you thinking about? He murmurs sleepily, about how I used to think needing someone was the most dangerous thing you could do. And now? Now I think the most dangerous thing is living your whole life behind walls, protecting yourself from hurt, but also blocking out love. I learned independence before love, but the greatest lesson has been learning that I can be both independent and connected, strong and vulnerable, self-sufficient and deeply needed by people who need me right back. Marcus kisses my forehead. That's my girl. The one who learned that the bravest thing you can do is let yourself be fully known and loved, I add. Let yourself be loved and loved, he agrees. I drift off to sleep, thinking about the journey that brought me here, from the 15-year-old girl forging signatures in a crisis to the woman I am now, building a life filled with partnership and purpose. I learned independence before I learned love, but ultimately, I learned that the two don't have to be mutually exclusive. The greatest revenge against a childhood that taught me to need no one was building an adulthood where I chose to need someone not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because he made my strong life even stronger by sharing it. I learned independence before love. But with Marcus, I learned that the greatest strength isn't standing alone, it's choosing to stand together, and that made all the difference.